Okay, we are live on Facebook. Mr. Chairman, you may now welcome everyone to the meeting and call it to order.
Welcome everyone to the March 25th Planning Commission work session. Good to see everybody. It's been a little while since we met last time. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Anita, could you do the roll call, please?
Yes, sir. Commissioner Benninger, Commissioner Braxton,
I'm here.
Commissioner Reed,
Here.
Vice Chair Jones,
Here.
Chairman Laws.
Here.
We do have a quorum, Mr. Laws. We do have 4 of the commission members.
Great.
And and as far as town staff, we do have Pete Peters, the town manager, Anita McMillan, Planning and Zoning Director, Ann Cantrell, Treasurer and Finance Director, Nathan McClung, Principal Planner, Julie Tusi, Planning and Zoning Coordinator, David Hill with Devi, the developer for Gishmill, Tyler McDaniel with Hill Studio. Correct, David Hill? Thank you. So I would like to confirm that the meeting is being held in accordance with ordinance number 1016 and section 4-0.01G, chapter 1289 of the 2020 Acts of the Virginia General Assembly. So, and everyone present is participating by electronic means. Chairman Lott, the meeting is yours.
Great, thank you, Anita. The next thing on our agenda in your agenda packet is for us to receive a briefing on the rezoning requests from staff to discuss the comments or in the proposed rezoning of the historical Gish Mill. So are you doing that, Nathan?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Great.
So good evening, Chair, members of the Commission. Tonight we're going to be doing a work session on the proposed rezoning for this property where the historic Gish Mill properties are located. Specifically, the property currently is zoned M1 limited industrial, and the proposed rezoning would go to mixed use development of the MUD district. The town is currently the owner of the property. We're in a due diligence phase with the development team. After we complete those items in the due diligence phase, the property ownership will transfer. The property is located at 350 Gustings Boulevard. There's 2 parcels actually that encompass the building, 350 and 0 Gustings Boulevard. Right now it's vacant, but previously in its historic nature, it operated, as a mill back from the 18th century onward until 2014. It did serve its historic purposes as a mill until the Holdren Country Store took it over, and then in 2014 they shut their doors. It was a farm supply store under the Holdren's family. The new mixed-use property would accommodate for restaurant, retail, residential, and lodging uses, and we'll learn more about how the building is broken down into its different uses later in this presentation. But first, I just wanted to give you a brief history of where we're up to at this point. The historical significance of this structure for the town, it may be, I would argue, the most important historic structure in town. It's even on the town seal, as you can see on the PowerPoint. It's the founding structure of the town. And even before Vinton became incorporated, the town of Vinton was previously known as Gish Mill. So before 1884, this area of Roanoke County was called Gish Mill, and then it became the town of Vinton. Up until this point, the town purchased, because of its historical significance, the town purchased it in 2015. And they didn't want the property just to sit and continue to be in its blighted and derelict state. So they issued an RFP for development responses in 2019, to which the Gish Mill Devi LLC responded with this creative idea of a mixed-use development for the property. after, doing a few more environmental analysis of the building, and, ironing out the details, the contract of sale between the town and development team was signed on April 8th, 2020. And since then, we've been really successful in actually getting some grants from some state government agencies. We have a $250,000 grant from DHR for the repair and stabilization work to take place, and then a second grant from the IRF loan program through the DHCD for $468,750. March 5th, we've attained notarized certification, which I'll talk about later on about what that entails. And then also we sent out all the notification letters to the adjoining property owners, and this month as well. Upcoming events, one's happening right now, the work session, and then next week we'll brief the BZA concerning the variances in the floodplain, and then we'll have a joint public hearing on April 6th with the town council. Some basic information on the property. So currently, of course, serving its historic purpose as a mill, it sits within the regulatory floodway and the special flood hazard area as defined by FEMA. So it is in a floodplain area, which poses some complexities to the design of the building and also some of the regulations. But it's really isn't a good, outwardly looking at it in its current state, it's not in a state of complete structural disrepair, but with the right team and the right architects and engineers working towards it, it can become adaptively reused into a really incredible looking project that's going to probably be the first one that you'll see like this in the Roanoke Valley. It can be accessed, of course, from Gustings Boulevard and West Madison Avenue. And one important thing to keep in mind when you're going through rezoning is what's around it, what's in the neighborhood, what's on the corridor. So to the north of it is actually the creek, and across from the creek is Roanoke City, where our jurisdictional line is. West of it is the Billy Bird Apartments and the future site of the Billy Bird, or the annex building, and the Glade Creek Greenway. Southeast of it is the Shalane's Embroidery and the Save on Signs industrial property. And then to the south, of course, is Gustings Boulevard. It's a really wide right of way. You can see from this map where this has been rezoned as MUD. And this is the site of the mill, these two parcels. Here's Shalane's. So right now it's all M1, but we're requesting that it would be converted to MUD. And a main reason why it needs to be MUD, the zoning currently doesn't allow for a mixed use in the M1 district. It doesn't allow for a mixed use development where you combine residential and commercial and lodging into a singular structure. This graph right here shows exactly where it's within the floodway with the hashed marks on that floodplain layer. The blue layer is the 100-year floodplain, and then the orange layer is a 500-year floodplain. In terms of regulations, you just focus on the 100-year and the floodway. This calls special considerations for the building because, being a CRS Class 8 community, we enforce our floodplain ordinance strictly, and we go above and beyond the minimum standards of the National Flood Insurance Program. Because of that, if this was to be, an empty vacant property where someone wanted to come in and build on it in the floodplain, there would be, it would almost be, it would be a really cost prohibitive project. With this being a historical structure, there's a certain degree where you're allowed to have a substantial improvement to a building if it's deemed historical. And this building has been deemed historical, and it's currently eligible for listing on the National Register of Historic Places. So that checks off the box for whether or not we could substantially improve this building. The next phase is actually getting the variances to prove that all the development and all the proposed redevelopment of the property and its activities will not cause even an inch rise in the floodplain levels. So we contracted with Draper Aden, and they took the model from the group at Hill Studio and the development team and put it into the flood model, and they showed that it was a rise of 0. So there's no rise at all of the base flood elevations from any of the activities involved with this redevelopment. And as I mentioned earlier, March 30th, we're going to have to go before the BZA as the town and the property owner to request certain variances, not a wholesale exemption from the ordinance, but certain things to be exempted from because of its historical nature. For instance, you can't elevate the building entirely because I mean, it's just not physically possible to elevate the building in such a way without destroying its historical nature. There's other regulations included in that variance that the BZA will be briefed on and have a public hearing on. I'll look at some pictures of the current condition of the property. So this is facing from the Gus Nix Boulevard side, and north elevation of the building. When you first go inside, there's a this is one of the 1940s additions that was made to the original mill structure. So you're facing east in this picture. If you go a little further, this is the second 1940s addition. And then right through that door is another addition that's not historic that will actually be demolished really early on in the project because it's structurally unsound, and they're actually going to use that concrete slab as a patio area for like outdoor seating and recreation and other to serve other amenities on the property. This is in the basement. The basement is a pretty incredible feature of this property. The ceilings are really tall. They have the original machinery. You can see right here the wheel inside that was powered by the water wheel outside. And it just has a really incredible stone foundation. Here's some of the second and third floors. As you can see, someone at one point had to cut a hole in the floor, possibly get machinery or to operate some kind of equipment. This is the backside of the building. That's the race or the sluice where water would go and be diverted from the dam. And there's the dam, or will remain to the dam. So with that, I would like to introduce Mr. David Hill. He's with the Gishmill Davi Group, and he's also joined by one of his staff members at Hill Studio, and they're going to give an analysis of the proposed redevelopment. So you've seen the conditions, the current conditions, and you've seen the current state it's in, and Dave's going to go over all the hard work they've been putting in on to this design as a mixed-use project. So David, I can control the PowerPoint and take it away.
Sure. Thanks, Nathan. And I believe many of you saw this a little initial a proposal that we had at the joint Town Council Planning Commission meeting. So I'll just kind of go through this with a little bit more emphasis on what Planning Commission might be interested in, and also try to be brief. So Nathan, if you don't mind, let's take a look at the next one. What we're going to try to do is, as Nathan mentioned, is really to celebrate that the town's oldest building and really its very unique character in this structure. And so there'll be some uses that really benefit from the Creekside location, particularly the first floor, main floor, as a restaurant and a market. The basement of the mill, which can be very far underwater during a flood, will be developed in a speakeasy fashion. That is, very Spartan. And then where we can get people out of the water, the upper stories will be initially will be a lodging. The lodging rooms will be larger than a typical lodging room, but they'll be so that they can also be a small apartment if the lodging use does not work out. And so we believe all those uses will be compatible with each other. And since the building is isolated generally from a lot of real nearby neighbors, the kind of outdoor potential noisy, celebration kind of atmosphere on the deck outside, we believe will be pretty well buffered by a lot of other, by the creek and streets and things like that. So Nathan, if you don't mind, we'll go to the next one. And of course, tell everybody if I missed something that you want to make sure that we emphasize on the text.
Yeah.
Okay. So the uses that you see, the restaurant, and of course the restaurant, even though I'm representing the land ownership company, which will be Gishmill Dave I. The restaurateur is of course proposed to be Dave Trinkle, who has developed the Fork in the Alley, Fork in the City, and Fork in the Market, those three restaurants. And so he says this will be a little different theme from those, but you know his quality in developing these kind of special, kind of outdoor and unusual places. So restaurant's about 5030, 5030 square feet. The market, which is really you know, kind of a supplement to the restaurant, especially for takeout, especially for the crowd that might be going to the lake, or also for people that live in Benton and really want to kind of stop by and quickly get a bite on the way home. It'll also have some retail things. That'll be 1250 square feet. The speakeasy in the basement, 1296. And then the old silos and the upper floors of the mill, 5800 square feet. And then a new feature, which is the deck on the back, will be 3,564 square feet. Okay, next slide, please. The site plan shows all this together, and we've developed this site plan based on the proposed Roanoke City, stream restoration project. You can see they've done an extraordinary job. They've got all the high quality trees marked, and they had, and some of the things that they were proposing, such as some of the channel improvements, and are shown there in the blue stream. You're also seeing in this site plan in brown toward the stream is the large deck with the red are typical umbrellas that you might see over seating. And also the little triangular shape, which Nathan might point out there on the far, that must be the south end of the building. Yeah, right there. That's the area where the unsafe wing of the building will be removed, leaving the concrete slab where we can put tables there. Also, you're seeing a kind of unusual parking lot shape that we were provided. We can provide a number of spaces there. But in order to supplement our parking, also to maybe help with the greenway parking, you'll see just a little additional parking added there to the right along the side street, yeah, right in there, that our project will help to provide. And we wouldn't imagine that would be too much of a problem for the adjacent business uses, because when we imagine our project will be busiest probably in the evenings, when nobody's working and the businesses nearby. And you can also, maybe Nathan can run you through how the greenway also connects through there. That's a really important feature. And we're looking forward to people coming to our business along the greenway up the creek. And you can see there's a supplemental parking lot over there, greenway parking there. And then we'll have one of those lights that people can activate to get across the street. That's part of the greenway project. And then pedestrians can use the sidewalk along Gus Nix Boulevard to come up and then walk down right down through there to get back on the greenway, and of course to get to the amenities on the site. I believe the long term, I don't think it's been quite figured out where the long term the greenway might go, but we'd be delighted if it went near, or if we can accommodate it through the property, because we want to invite all those folks to come see the mill. Did I leave anything out here, Nathan?
No, you covered everything really well.
Okay.
Hey, David, just real quick, a
Yeah.
question. When I come across the crosswalk there on Gus Nix,
Right.
right, and walk up the hill, I guess you could say, and then downhill, is the opening to the left, the small little, is that still going to be open as well, or is that a wall there? Or something open by the silos? Can you also walk across there and go down to the left and go into the property? Yeah,
you can definitely go in there. There's a wall right where the crosswalk is shown, and that's shown on the plans that have been developed by the town and VDOT. And so when you walk across, there's an existing wall that'll be right in front of you, sort of shown in dark green here. And so I don't know how to make that any better. You know, it seems like it's a spot which is low enough on the grade of the bridge that is handicapped accessible, but you will be having a little bit of a wall with a railing there as you walk across. So, you know, you can't just kind of flop right on into the property. You have to turn left or right. But if you turn left, you're welcome to come into the property, and then there you go. See where the handicap space is just north of the cursor? Yeah, that could also serve as additional parking. There are 3 or 4 parking spaces there, including the handicap space, you know, for the greenway. And then there's a sidewalk system just to the left of the cursor. You can see we pick up the sidewalk coming across the bridge, yeah, and take that on into our property to get to the deck. So people can come on in that way as well.
Mr. Chair, this is Pete. Also
Pete.
want to just highlight that the crosswalk final design has not been done. So that could be altered slightly. We haven't quite figured out where that crosswalk from the parking lot that Nathan's got the highlighter on, where that exact crosswalk will go across Gus Nick. So that could be refined 30, 50 feet in either direction. We're going to do our best to try to make that make sense and meet the grades and the topography of the site, but that is yet to be fully designed.
Gotcha. Thanks, Pete.
It's interesting Pete brings that up. You know, I think on earlier schemes, it was maybe down to the left about, well, on the other side of the entrance to our property, which might make a better spot. But you know, that either way works fine for what we're trying to do. You know, it really depends on what the VDOT, you know, really it has to do with, I think, a lot with visibility and where they have the best chance of getting people to slow down the most.
What that rendering does not show is there will be a respite island in the middle of Gus Nick's to break up those 4 lanes. And we'll need that turn lane there going into the Billy Bird lot to create that bulb in the middle, that island. And so that's kind of what we have to design, is where exactly that makes the most sense to widen Gus Nick's into that turn lane so that we can accommodate that center island. And the idea of the island is that when you approach the sidewalk, you push the button to turn the signals on. You only have to cross 2 lanes, and you have some place in the middle there to feel a little more safe before you cross the next 2 lanes, just to make sure that the traffic is stopped in both directions. So that design there isn't fully accurate of what the crosswalk will all encompass once it's fully designed and constructed.
Gotcha.
Is there enough room on the back of the mill? There's not enough room on the back of the mill on the creek side for the greenway, is there?
Well, we looked at that, you know, and actually we're trying to study that at one time. It would be remarkably tight, but we kind of backed away from it because I believe with the alcohol laws, we couldn't get the deck to work and the trail to be, you know, on 2 different alignments. The only way to do it would be to walk everybody through the deck, which would be fine with us, except the alcohol folks didn't like that idea. They think that it should be, you know, that people should have the option of going onto that deck. But I will mention, I mean, this may be way beyond the scope of what we're thinking about tonight. The property line, we believe the property line is shown correct on this map. Yeah, and you can see there's a tremendous amount of property available on the other side of the stream. At one point, and I believe it was because the earlier owners of the mill had to own the mill pond, and there was a dam, so they owned all the property that the dam and the pond took up. And so if it was, you know, if it seemed reasonable to put the alignment over there, Dave, I would be happy with that. In fact, maybe even consider reconstruction of the old bridge. There used to be a pedestrian bridge just below the dam, and you know, if Greenway Plans eventually did that, you know, we'd be delighted to share in, you know, making that work.
Interesting.
But I think it may depend on where you want to run the greenway. I know getting under the railroad trestle upstream is it's been kind of an impediment. So I know you eventually want to get to Vineyard Park. Is it Vineyard Park you're trying to get to up that way? No,
Yes.
Vineyard Park, you're right. But you have to go under the railroad trestle line. And I know maybe Anita and Pete know a lot more about, the progress of that. I haven't kept up with it. But for our, yeah.
As far as we're talking about Glade Creek Greenway Phase 3, we did apply for SDBG fund for engineering study, but was not funded. But we are looking at alternatives because, like you said, Norfolk Southern, it's not easy to get approval for Norfolk Southern. So we are looking at other ways to connect that Greenway to Vineyard Park.
So you're welcome to use any piece of this that that makes sense on our property. It's just running back there with the alcohol on the deck might have been a problem. Okay, want me to keep going?
Please.
Okay. So Tyler has done these really neat drawings of the mill in 3 dimensions, and so here you can see that how the deck and that triangular pad relate to the rest of the building up there along the creek, and then one of the, I'll caution you, the model is generally pretty accurate, but when you really zoom in for precision details, it seems like it's more together than the design, but it's a study model. So so the next couple of images will show that building and how it plans to be used and relate to the deck in particular. You can see the old loading dock here in the lower left. That'll be used. That's the old loading dock that'll be the entrance into the facility for most customers. And then on the very left end there, Nathan, that old loading dock, that'll actually be the loading dock into the back of house facilities for the kitchen. The way that we design this building, we have to really deal with the absolutely known issue of the floodplain. And so that area that Nathan was just showing you, that'll be hardened, and that's where a lot of the expensive kitchen equipment goes. And of course, the old silos are very hardened, and that'll be where the lodging units are. And then the old brick part of the mill, the upper stories, the ones here with the windows, that'll be where the lodging is as well. The fact that it stayed there several centuries gives us a little bit of a confidence, I say, that that it can stay longer. The areas up to the right will generally be just designed so that the water can flow through them. In fact, we bring electricity down from the top, and we try to minimize the number of utilities under the floor because they could be damaged. But we just need to know that probably during our lifetime, we'll see water in that part of the building, and we just have to, we design in order to deal with it. So if it works, it could be a model for other communities in a number of ways. For example, in Roanoke City, the whole biomedical park is in a similar floodplain, and that those buildings were developed so that mostly is parking in that first floor. But there are other parts of those buildings that can get wet, as an example.
David,
this shows the part of the building that's on the back near the stream, and you can see in this side there are a number of punctured openings or punched openings that's just so that we can roll up these large garage doors in the summertime and kind of flow from the building out onto the deck. And the kind of funny shaped roof there, I haven't really gotten into Tyler about this in particular, but there's a kind of an interesting roof currently in this spot, and we keep the old sluice there. That's the old sluice that used to bring the water to the water wheel, which was in the corner. And so we're going to keep that area, and that'll be there'll be sort of the two sides of it will be like benches, and there'll be a huge table between them. So you can have a kind of a large party of a dozen or so seated there in the old sluice. And on the far right end, you see the old silos. They'll have doors that are right there against the ground, and that's all punched into those silos. That's a solid concrete structure. And so the doors are carved in, and that'll allow sidewalk to be right outside, and that'll be access to those units right there. Okay. This is just another view from a different angle showing that. Okay. Oh yeah, this is the only addition to the building, and this you can see in the front of that there's kind of a big false facade that was placed at one time. There you go, kind of linking the old brick part of the building into the newer metal additions. And in order for us to get a good fire escape into the building, we have stairs below that, and we come up into a new hallway that's shown there with the windows around it, and get from there into the old building. So we believe that DHR is gonna like this. You know, they're trying for us not to have any additions, but we've got to have a good fire escape, and so that's where this will be. You really won't see it from Gus Nix Boulevard. You may see a little bit of it from the bridge. Okay. And then this is sort of sitting on the deck in the afternoon. This is where you can hear the stream. We're just to our right is the waterfall that's created by the old dam that's been torn down, but it's still got a big change in elevation there. And then the next illustration, I believe, might be indoors. There you go. You can see the great big column structure. You probably saw that from Nathan's earlier picture. And we got a lot of columns and braces to work around. So Tyler's come up with some ingenious ways to incorporate them into tables and things like that. Okay. Floor plan. You can see the dining. We were just in room 102. That was where we just were. And over to its right is a part of the kitchen. That'll be the part where the cooking part of the kitchen, and restrooms are right there. And then to the far right is the market. And then if you move from there to the left, you'll go into you'll see the thicker walls there, the older brick part of the building. And dining room 107 is dining in the older part of the mill. And you can see the steps going down to the speakeasy there. And then a screen porch in the back of house is where, dishwashers, freezers, things like that go. And then you can see just above that, those units developed in the old silos. Okay. Speakeasies in the basement. You haven't designed a lot of stuff there, but you can see just kind of what's there. Okay. And this shows, okay, this is going up to the second floor. You can see two of the lodging units there, and the 3 lodging units to the left are in the old silos. Okay. And then the very top, let's see, top floor here, I believe. Yeah, 3rd floor. So again, we have a couple of units in the old brick building, and units also in the silos. And there's a light well in the silos too, which would be kind of fun to have the light coming down into that space. And also there's a little seating area right there at the entrance to the light well. Okay. Next, okay, this one is a really important view of the building, because you can see in it the 100-year floodplain. 100-year floodplain is about it's about 4 feet above the floor, and that's the actual the upper line there is it's a couple of feet above the 100-year floodplain. That would be, if we were going to site a new building, that's where it would have to be, that upper line there. So so the way we do this, everything below that line, we need to make it so that we don't mind it getting wet every now and then. And then everything above it, that's where we have people, stay, spend the night, etc. Even though you can enter the silos below that line, there's no furniture, no beds or anything down there. It's all second floor and up.
David, talking about the flood elevation, what's a 10-year flood elevation?
You know, that's a great question. I don't know the 10-foot datum. That would be a great question. Does anybody, Nathan or Anita, do you happen to know? It might be back on one of our earlier slides, but I don't know if we actually keep a 10-year datum on this screen.
Yeah, I don't believe FEMA, like even FEMA really gets down to a lot. I'm sure there are mapping programs that do that, but from a regulatory standpoint, FEMA only gets into really the 100 and 500 year for any kind of like anything in relation to development, and also the floodway as well, if that's mapped to the community, which in Vinton, all of our floodways are mapped as well.
You know, I've got anecdotal data on this. The fella who used to be the miller, a guy named Keller Poole, told me that he's seen water in the building twice during his lifetime. Once was flood of 80, I think it was 85 when everything got really inundated. And I think there was another time around the turn of the century, right around 2000, that he said the water got in the building, but barely, like, you know, just enough to cover the floor. So last time we've seen water at the first floor level has been about the year 2000, about 20 years. But that's just anecdotal, you know. But that's a great question. I wish we could answer it.
You know, David, that that concept is the same way that the now Cargill feed mill used to be the Southern States. That's the same way that was built, that the underneath was designed that the water would come in, get through, and go back out. And in 1985, there was 18 feet of water on the warehouse floor.
Wow.
So,
wow. And is this
probably could take those.
Wow.
And that was a over 100-year flood event. And that would have been where Keller was talking about.
Right.
And it was 18 feet there at the mill, and it was, I guess, about 5 at his place.
Well, the Cargill mill, is that the one that's down next to the Roanoke City boundary? Is that down Walnut Street, right? The city.
Yes.
City.
Used to
Okay.
be Southern
Wow.
State.
18
Now
feet
it's
deep. That's
18 feet in the warehouse.
wow. Right. And so I believe the Army Corps has come back and decided that the 1985, they call it a design flood. It's almost like the worst condition you could ever imagine, like a 500-year or 1,000-year flood. And that would be that upper line right there, I believe, where, on this mill. And it's interesting you pointed that out. I know if you look at historic mills, they all have this problem because they put them next to the stream. So the it's just kind of one of the unfortunate issues. If you want to save a mill, you're just going to have to deal with Mother Nature here.
You could, you do have another source there right across the street from you, Shalane, Mr. Charlotte's dad.
Leslie.
Mr. Leslie, he could tell you, or son Greg, where the water was in their building, and you could take a sighting from that and come right across and you would know where you were.
Great idea. I will talk to them about that. Thank you. And they would also know about the year 2000 flood, I believe. They were there then. These sections show the building from other angles. And again, you can see that flood, predicted flood level there. And so let's see, especially on these sections, you can see it almost gets up to the, well, it's up to the windows generally on 100-year flood level, and the 500 years up to the roof or up to the ceiling there. So it can be really deep. So we have to just be ready for that. Things like the insulation system has to be designed so it doesn't hold water, those kind of things. So we're using a whole lot of unusual construction methods on this. Okay. Okay, Nathan, I'll hand the baton back to you.
Yeah, thanks, David. Yeah, thanks for going over that. It's always interesting to see. Like, actually, I learned something new from the last time, so it's good to keep getting this over. Hear more about it. So from the future land use, this property from the comprehensive plan, and then also the updates from the UDA plan in 2016. This property was just, determined in the future to be general commercial. Of course, across the street, those have been rezoned as MUD, but during the 2016 UDA plan, they were designated as high density residential parks and rec community facilities. And of course, the Shalane's property also was designated as general commercial in the future. So with that said, the staff recommend approval of this rezoning. We find that the mixed use property that accommodates those different uses will be consistent with the existing uses on the adjoining properties to the west and to the southeast, which contain both residential with Billy Bird and then the commercial uses, of course, with the future Billy Bird Annex and the currently existing Shalane's and sign manufacturer. It's going to encourage economic vitality in the community, and it's also going to save one of our, it's going to save our founding structure, and not just save it so that it'll be preserved in the state of like a museum or mothball, but actually produce, produce jobs and bring life into the building, allow people to enjoy it once again with these suitable alternative uses that have been presented. Currently, adequate utilities and public facilities are in place to serve the proposed end uses as well. This will be our third MUD. The first one was Rolney Cook Lofts, and then of course Billy Bird Apartments across the street. Those have both been successful, and we don't expect this one to be any different. This will be another benchmark of success, and through the utilization of historic tax credits. And also local government. And, this one thing we've been really trying to focus in on is the fact this is truly a public-private partnership throughout it all. So with those grants and the historic tax credits and the private financing and work of the development team, we think this project can be a real success. So pending your response and questions, that is the presentation for this evening on the Gishmill.
What effect would the MUD have? Is there any negative effect that this could have on Mr. Leslie's property? Because it's all going to go together, I assume.
No. So the only let me go back to the zoning map. So only these two parcels are going to be rezoned as to MUD. Mr. Leslie's property down here will remain M1.
Oh,
Limited
okay.
industrial. Yeah. And actually West Madison Avenue is town right of way. So even though it has a zoning designation, it's actually just public right of way. So across the street will still remain M1. It'll just be these two parcels that remain are rezoned to MUD.
Thank you.
No worries. Good question.
Have you gotten any comments from the community sent in, or people like or dislike the idea?
Our office hasn't received any formal responses to like the legal ads in the paper, but those just ran last Thursday and this Thursday. So I expect that we'll have more comments coming in after the second newspaper ad, and as it's going to be in the paper. I mean, it was in the paper today because of the State of the Town address talked about it. So I think we'll get more comments. But most informal comments I've heard have been, excitement and looking forward to it being, brought back to a new adaptive use, and all the benefits that it'll bring to the community.
And Dave, this is Pete again. We did also, I believe it was around 2017, held some public meetings where we presented some conceptual plans that incorporated much of what David Hill is proposing in this redevelopment and the requiring the MUD. So at that point, we did have pretty good citizen engagement on those conceptual plans and really received no negative comment. So this has been, I guess, vetted to a certain degree prior to this petition to rezone.
Okay. I can't think of anything negative. Every once in a while, somebody will come up with something that nobody's ever thought or dreamed about. And that, I mean, this is a great use. And if we don't do this, we're going to lose this. That you can't do anything other than let it go this way. I don't believe.
Yeah, I would agree.
I have
As
one
long-
question. I just have one question. Were we leaning towards like apartments, or are we leaning towards like a bed, like an Airbnb or something like that?
So I can answer that question. We're gonna, like in the nature of the request, well, currently in MUD, you could do lodging and or apartments. So of course there's gonna be the Airbnb, short-term model. But a few of the units are large enough to be actual long-term apartments. So David, I think with you speaking for the development team, I think it'll come down to see if that larger space would be a comfortable place for a long-term stay. But if not, it could always be completely, Airbnb style short-term stays, or maybe one or two of the units could be used for long-term apartment.
Right. We initially we had one apartment over the restaurant. We're thinking that might be a restaurant employee, so we wouldn't complain about the noise, and then everything else would be Airbnb type units. But Benton has had some really successful historic apartments, with the Billy Bird right across the street, and also Roland E. Cook. And so, and doesn't have a good, I don't think it has a lodging at all. So we felt like, well, at first we're going to see if we can make all these lodging. I think that might be really beneficial for everybody. But I believe Pete might have told me recently, well, Roland E. Cook is 100% rented. And I believe Billy Bird is in the 90s. It's been remarkable. You've had, a lot of people want to live in Benton. So there seems to be market if we wanted to go apartments. But I believe at first we're going to try to make these VRBO units, because we believe that'll actually bring a better return. And actually, we think it'd be more interesting to try. But we want to leave it flexible. And I think the MUD ordinance gives us that kind of flexibility.
Yeah, I like the idea of the Airbnb, but I mean, I think either way it's a win. I mean, honestly, you really go either way.
I just have a comment. I don't really have a question, but Pete mentioned back in 2017, I think it was, I remember we did a kind of like a public input on some conceptual drawings, and I don't know who had the great idea. It was right during the Roland E. Cook when that was going on as well, but somebody had the great idea to just like ask David Hill if he would be interested in just drawing some conceptual drawings of what we could do with the mill. And knowing probably in the back of their mind, whoever it was, knowing that when David started drawing it, that he was going to fall in love with this building. And I like to think that's what happened. And so that stayed on his radar after his drawings. And he himself went out and found somebody to partner with and decided to do it himself. So this is a win, and we're lucky as we can be to have David Hill in the town of Benton at the right place at the right time to fall in love with this project. So thanks, David Hill.
Well, thank you, Keith. You're too nice. You know, you did recite that story about how I remembered it. And although I've, you know, let my guard down to think that you guys put that bait out there and I grabbed it. But remember, after we did those schemes, I believe the town actually offered it up for development RFPs maybe once or twice. And we kind of stood on the sideline, you know, hoping somebody would dive in. But we really always had, you know, if nobody took it, we were there. So, you know, I really appreciate, the town has been extraordinarily good to us in you know, making this a partnership and in every imaginable way, including Keith, you and council and the planning commissioners that I've talked to have been very encouraging. So we really want to make this a great project for Benton.
I'm sure it will be. I mean, if anyone has any like reservations about that, just go walk through Roland E. Cook.
Yeah, I just have a comment as well. I mean, the thoroughness of this plan is really impressive. I mean, the walkability has been considered, the environmental impacts have been considered. And I just really love seeing these historical places repurposed like this. I mean, this is just really impressive. So great job on the plans. I just had one question. It's kind of small, but along the back side of the building where the deck is going to be, is there going to be, you know, water access where people can walk down to kind of the actual creek, or is that going to be sealed off?
Well, it's really steep back
Okay.
there, and that was, you know, that's an interesting question. I right now what we have over on the left, if you see where the handicap parking space is, from there down to we have a series of ramps to kind of get you into the speakeasy. You actually go under the deck a little bit to get into the speakeasy. It's pretty complicated. This is kind of like going into a coal mine. It's a pretty complicated system. But the area where this kind of ramp that goes down and under the deck could also give people, you know, pedestrian access down to the stream side right there. And so it will be just outside of where those umbrellas are, right where Nathan's hand is showing you. And so it will be possible to get there, but you know, there's just not a whole lot of room there. And everything from the deck on upstream is really way too steep for people to access. But that little area just outside the deck, I believe you could walk down to the stream right there.
Okay. Yeah, I've never seen the waterfront there, so just wanted to check on that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's actually it's a beautiful place back there. You wouldn't think that it looks like it does back there, but it is beautiful. And I'm not sure if everyone on here knows, and Pete knows, probably Pete and Nathan and Anita know best, and probably David, but there are plans, and I think Nathan mentioned at the very beginning of the water, the creek revitalization, that they're actually going to move and widen that and kind of make it go underneath the bridge at a different angle. Which will also, from what I understand, and I could be wrong, so Pete, correct me, but there will also it'll be wide enough and deep enough for people to canoe and kayak and
Wow.
tube down that by there. So, and end up at the 3rd Street canoe launch. Is that right, Pete? That's the city project. It's not our project.
I can speak to that. This is Nathan. We currently, Roanoke City is doing that, undergoing a stream bank restoration project from all the way from the bridge, the railroad bridge, heading this way to the north up Clay Creek, all the way down to the city limits on the past the Billy Burr Apartments property on the creek. So they're doing a complete stream bank restoration project that's going to restore the stream functions and reduce erosion. Specifically across from the mill, they're going to be implementing various techniques to one, slow down, or they're going to help with the movement of water down this portion of the creek. But right here, they're going to install a little it's called a J-hook structure that's going to raise the water level behind where it's installed. And like Dave was talking earlier about how the dam elevation actually drops pretty significantly, it'll actually raise the water a little bit behind here that will help with fish populations that have to migrate upstream. Because right now, it's actually not an acceptable height for fish to go upstream further. And they actually think that this habitat improvements will actually attract a lot more trout to this area. So hopefully we'll have more, fishing recreation as well with their, of course, with their huge improvements to the stream bank itself.
Hey, if you like, I've got a couple of pictures I can show you. Nathan, maybe if you point out that that little white triangle that is just outside of the deck, it's actually where the old dam was, and you can see the water. It's kind of white there, where it kind of comes over there. See that area? And if you like, Nathan, I'll share this this picture with everybody, and you can see a. Check this out. Can you guys see this photo? Okay, Sarah, you see this one?
Yes.
This shows that area, where we would have the table and the sluice, and over there to the left is that little white area that was in the plan that Nathan just had. And then let's see if I click here. This photo here, can everybody see that one? Okay, that's a view of the stream from that very spot that we were talking about. So I believe people could just walk down here, down to the water, and it's really quite beautiful. It's a real surprise because the building looks kind of industrial, and you have no idea there's a stream back behind there. So
Yeah, I had no idea.
yeah, it's really neat. So I believe that's one of the real attractions to this. So we're really looking forward to sharing that with everybody.
It was
One of
exciting.
the things that I would be interested, I'd like to look, I've never been in the building other than the showroom.
Mm.
And
Oh, there you
I'd
go.
really like to look around before you
Oh, okay.
start taking things apart
Sure.
for the repurpose, especially the milling part of the facility. And I hope that in the speakeasy room, you leave some of that stuff down in there. I mean, it's just for looks now. You would never use it for milling anymore, but it sure would make some nice talking points for people to see. Now, up in the top portion where the bins were, I'm curious to see what that is, but that would, other than me, probably nobody'd ever be interested in what that was. That somebody did fall in one of those bins 20 years ago, and they had to, that might be why that hole's cut in there, because they had to get equipment in there to get the person out.
Wow. Well, we'd love to show you. There's some great big machines up in the top, and huge funnels and things like this that we're going to try to use. For example, the gigantic aluminum funnels. We're developing a light design, so it'll kind of come down on the kitchen table and have a huge light at the bottom. Some of these other machines are enormous, and we haven't figured out what to do with them. But I don't think we can turn them in. Yeah, like that. There you go. Okay, thank you, Nathan.
That's the bottom of a well, the box is where the grain came out, and that yellow thing that's a grinder, and the metal piece next to it, that's the bottom of a cyclone, where you took the air back out of the bins when you put stuff in.
Wow,
That's what those are. So
cool. Yeah.
You've got a lot of neat stuff in there just from these pictures. That would be a shame to somebody not knowing what it is and just, oh, well, that's a bunch of junk and take it out. There's a lot of historical stuff right there that would be neat, just painted and left in place.
Well, a lot of it we plan to, but I'd love, Mr. Jones, if you would volunteer to go through, we would love to get you to share your thoughts on what some of these things are. And we will interpret a lot of them in place. But some of them are so big, we may have to remove them, but we'd love to get your thoughts on that. If you have some time, I'll follow back with you and we'll find a
Okay.
time to walk through. I'd really appreciate that. That would be great. And as you see, a lot of those great big pulleys, we do plan to leave those in place. They'll be in the guest rooms and in the restaurant.
Well, I'm thinking a little bit along the lines of on the Parkway, the mill, Mabry Mill,
Neighbor Mill, yeah.
which still works, and you're not going to be able to do that, but you've got some of the exact same equipment there that could be show placed and used as ornaments in that building.
Yes, sir. That's right. I'd love to get your thoughts on it. It'd be really neat. So I'll follow back. Nathan, you'll have to put us in touch and we'll have a chance to walk through and show all that to Mr. Jones and find out what some of those things are.
Yeah, Plan Commission field trip.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions or comments for David or Tyler or Nathan? All right, should we move on to the next briefing?
Well, do you need to vote on this?
No, this is just a work session.
Okay.
It's
Oh,
just
that's right.
we'll vote on it on the 6th of April with
I
town council.
gotcha.
Well, thanks, everybody.
Thanks, David Hill. Appreciate you being with us and showing us this.
Oh, yes. Thank you all very much. And I look forward to, if anybody else wants to go, we'll get Nathan to arrange a tour for us. We'll take you through. Maybe very helpful.
go,
actually, before
Nathan.
you vote. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll go, but let's hurry up and go before snake season starts.
Yeah,
Mm,
good idea.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dave.
So our next briefing for tonight is the fiscal year 2021 and fiscal year 2022 through 2028 capital improvement plan from staff. And I'm not sure, I think that would probably be Ann Cottrell to lead us through this presentation for the SIP to review.
Thank you, Keith. Yes, good evening, everybody. Great to see you here tonight. We have some good news for you. Hopefully, it'll be very exciting because I know over the last couple of years, we haven't been able to fund our capital improvement plan, and we're in a much better position this year, and we have a great plan for you all tonight. If you want to go to the next slide, Nathan. We wanted to start out with a discussion on fund balance and where we currently are, and that will kind of lead into our capital discussion. In fiscal year 20, we ended in a much better position than we had hoped. We drastically froze our spending at the onset of the pandemic, and we anticipated drastic reductions in revenues. Thankfully, we didn't experience the reductions that we heard could happen. So we ended up adding about $700,000 to our fund balance in fiscal year 20. We also made drastic reductions in fiscal year 21. That was a time during the unknowns when we were building our budget in May and June. So we really weren't sure what the impact was going to be into the following year. Now that we're well past 6 months into the fiscal year, we have a much better comfort level on where our revenues are. And we feel like we can add a lot of this capital back in that had to be reduced in the budget originally. So this is basically a briefing that we did to council at its work session, and we're bringing the same briefing here to you. We have $1 million in fund balance that's eligible to be allocated to the capital fund. In current year revenues, we're trending about $500,000 above what our current budget is. So we have a fiscal year 22 CIP budget programmed in for $550,000. And so if you take fund balance, current year revenue, and the fiscal year 22 CIP budget, this year and next year, we have about $2 million that we can spend on capital funds or one-time projects. Some of the items for consideration that we discussed with town council was the capital improvement program. We also discussed using the funding for PTO conversion from sick and vacation leave to a one bank leave. This is something that came up during some of our long tenured employees that left or retired, and we had them on the books for a very long time. And so council asked us to take a look at this liability and see if there's something that we would recommend reducing. Also, another option is early debt retirement. That's always something that's good to look at when you have available funding, or an other option, anything that is a priority for the town council. I do want to discuss, it's not on the slide, but we underwent a new process this year on CIP. We actually had Nathan McClung from planning and Brandon Gann from the finance department review and kind of develop a ranking for the different projects. And this is what the town manager used to develop his overall budget plan for CIP. So if Nathan has a second, I'd love for him to jump in and tell you what he did.
Yeah, so Brendan and I, we try to develop the most objective way possible to rank the projects that are within the three buckets, one being capital, one being utility, and the last being stormwater. We try to do it objectively because you have different requests coming from different departments. And also, it's difficult to try to develop a table of priority because some projects, always they're urgent because they're either emergency, and then some, like we were discussing earlier, they've been requested in the past. But when we first, we're tasked with developing some kind of matrix or some kind of criterion, we used the town council's former strategic plan that's still in place, the 5-year strategic plan, as one of the parameters. And we set out different criterion and weighted them differently based on how much weight they would have towards the scoring value. And then, really what we did was we went project by project, screened it through this criterion and assigned it a score. After going through all the projects that the departments had requested, we gave that to the town manager. And of course, we try to be objective as possible, but the CIP isn't just limited to numbers and a scoring sheet. It was supposed to be used more as a guide. So it doesn't box us in, but we did develop some kind of framework that in the future CIP planning processes, we can continue using that criteria just to get an initial review of what is of a high priority, what is bearing a lot of weight and needs to be considered for maybe short term or long term, and what's urgent. It's a good measure. So it really is kind of more as a litmus test for these projects. I say projects, but really any kind of capital need for the town. But we we collaborated with that project, and hopefully it served the interest of the town well.
Thanks, Nathan. You can go ahead and move to the next slide, please. Okay, so one of the things that the town manager worked on was a current year appropriation. What could we accomplish, or some of the things we would like to do in the current fiscal year and add back? And so one of those was to have funding set aside to pay out some of our vacation and sick accrual liability. This would give the town flexibility to go to a paid time off plan. This has not moved forward yet, but staff is working on a policy, and there's still a good chance we could get this accomplished this year. The municipal building window replacement was a major initiative. The HVAC needs to be replaced on the municipal building. The parking lot needs to be repaved. This includes the drive-through lane on the side of the municipal building, lighting, as well as wall packs, pedestal, and awning lights. The manager's suite and finance office has some workspace needs that weren't addressed in CARES Act that need to be completed. And then one that's been very important and was mentioned a couple times is Clearview traffic signal improvement. This is something that desperately needs to be done. We have the funding set aside on the current year CIP. Another project is Hardy Road paving. This would be from CVS to the town limits. If Pete wants to jump in, I have a feeling he knows the date that this was last paved, but it desperately needs to be addressed.
Last time it was paved is when it was constructed, and I think that was probably in the early 90s, from my recollection. So it's been quite a time since that's seen any new asphalt.
Thank you, Pete. Yeah, so that one was a high priority from the town manager. And then the stream bank stabilization is on there. And then the Gish Mill delivery, that includes scaffolding, tree removal, and debris disposal for $50,000. So the total current year projects was 1.2 million of funding that we've identified. And then also Public Works, we do have 550,000 in the capital fund set aside for a grant match that we've applied for. And I believe that should come in fiscal years anytime 24, 25, 26. So we have that set aside.
And just real quick, that's for Mountain View, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
So we have our funding set aside, Keith. We're basically just waiting until that state grant funding comes through. So I think we're set on our side.
Perfect.
Okay, so then fiscal year 22, we have community development, which is the gateway sign entrances and landscaping for 40,000. We have the Greenway Phase 2B VDOT match for 50. Gish Mill parking and facade improvements. We also have work site and work zone safety package. This is a lot of their signage and different safety protocols, signage that says road work, construction ahead, things like that, cones, traffic signal improvements at various intersections. We have the remainder of our enterprise resource software replacement. This is what we use for HR, it's what we use for finance. Museum electrical upgrades, streetscape planters, and body cameras. And one thing to note, there has been one change from when this went out. The museum electrical upgrades came in higher than anticipated. So those streetscape planters have actually been moved to the following fiscal year. And that 10,000 has been allocated up to the museum upgrades. Thanks, Nathan. And then the body cameras, this is actually a portion of it. They're going to hopefully get a grant for the rest of it or be able to use asset forfeitures. But this would equip our police department to replace their in-car cameras, and they're also going to replace or actually get brand new body cameras that they do not currently have. So in the utility fund for next year, we are actually issuing debt. This is hopefully going to close next week. We've been working diligently with Davenport and Company as well as our bond counsel to get that accomplished. The three major initiatives in this debt include the SCADA system upgrade, a water meter upgrade phase 2. So this would move all of our water meters to electronic radio read meters, and then a renovation and upgrade of the 3rd Street sewer lift station. So the total projects in that debt issuance is 4.3 million. Okay, so that was this fiscal year and next fiscal year. So now looking ahead, this is going to be fiscal year 23. And the way our fiscal year works, for anybody who's not familiar with our budget, it's the year that the fiscal year follows July 1 to June 30. And it's the year that it ends. So July 1, 2022 to June 30th of 2023. This is the projects that we have slated. So for the police department, we have taser replacement, radar replacement. We also have a wood chipper included. This is a piece of equipment that we currently rent. So there are some cost savings from going ahead and purchasing. We also have the swimming pool closure. This will fill and cap and allow for future park construction at that site. We have set aside funding for the install of a skate park with amenities. The Greenway Phase 2B VDOT match, this is the second portion of that grant is in this budget. Traffic signal improvements, and then sidewalks at Vineyard Road. Okay, and then in the utility fund, we didn't have any cash funding for fiscal year 22 because of that large debt issuance. But we do start to see some cash funded CIP again in 23. So we have a mini excavator set to purchase, and then we also have a First Street water main replacement. And then in the stormwater fund, we're hoping at this point we can do the capital study for that fund. In fiscal year 24, we have fuel pump replacements. We have traffic signal improvements. You may see a trend here. We're trying to tackle a certain number of these each year in the CIP. We have a dump truck replacement to include the snow plow and salt spreader. We also have the underground fuel storage tanks. So this would replace the underground and the above ground above on the fuel pumps. And then the sidewalks for Bypass Road. In the utility fund, we have the Meadows well opening slated. In fiscal year 25, we have our next segment of traffic signal improvements. We also have bridge maintenance for Garthright Bridge, sidewalks for Cleveland, and then we have in the utility fund the sewer easement jetter and then the Pitt Peak water line replacement. Okay, moving forward to fiscal year 26, we have another funding for the bridge maintenance for Garthright Bridge, the next set of traffic signal improvements. We have a contingency here for Mountain View Road. So if this grant comes over and we need more funding on our side, we do have that contingency built in. And then we also have a generator connection and transfer switch gear. In the utility fund, we have the Valley Hall water line replacement, realignment, and then we have a pickup truck that's needed with a dump body. All right, plugging right along. We're almost there. Fiscal year 27, we have guardrails for Giles Avenue, 3rd Street, Niagara Road, or Woodland Place. We also have the enclosure of the equipment shelter. We have a municipal building roof replacement, and then we have the public works storage area repairs and improvements. And then fiscal year 28, we have the reconstruction of the public works parking lot, the replacement of the backhoe front end loader, the Wolf Creek Greenway bathroom, refuse truck replacement, and the install of guardrails at Chestnut Avenue. And so fiscal year fiscal year 22 to fiscal year 28, so just the future here, we have a 7-year capital improvement plan for $4.2 million, and we do have the annual budget funded. So if we can continue this track, we have a fully funded CIP plan for the next 7 years. Thank you, Nathan. And then one of the things I wanted to add, this is always a discussion, is what is the role of the Planning Commission in the CIP? This is listed in the comprehensive plan. So the Planning Commission is directed in the plan to provide advice and direction on the CIP, and it typically makes a recommendation for council to approve or to approve with modifications to the plan. So Mr. Peters is here with me, and we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
And thank you for those presentations. And if I may just add one quick note, we are accurately or currently monitoring the American Recovery Plan funds. That is the next phase of stimulus from the COVID pandemic. So we are anticipating getting some additional funds that it's fairly limited in what we can utilize those funds for, much as the first phase was. But there are considerable flexibilities for water and sewer projects. So some of the utility fund projects that you see in outlying years will more than likely be elevated much quicker as those funds for ARP are allocated. So we feel like we'll be able to tack off quite a few of those utility projects in the next 24 months, so to speak. And we'll certainly come back and update the Planning Commission as well as council on those activities in the near future. We're just starting to get the guidance on what those funds are utilized for. And so we'll be developing a plan, and we'll be presenting that in the next couple of council meetings.
Great. Hey, Pete, just one question with that, what you just mentioned with the CARES Act, maybe some additional funding. Would that also take care of some of the improvements at the municipal building that we weren't able to do with the recent CARES Act funding that we got? I know we got a lot of things done in there, but just curious, I know we used a lot of those funds. However, like the HVAC system and the windows, would that qualify under the CARES Act?
It does not appear so. The guidance that's coming out with the new round of funds, it's fairly limited, and it has to be used for water or sewer projects, broadband, which we're in pretty good shape in the town. It can be used for revenue replacement, But as Ann mentioned earlier, our revenues weren't as impacted negatively as we anticipated. So it'd probably be a fairly hard case to make that those funds could be used for revenue replacement. And then there is some bonus pay that, if you will call it that, for public safety or frontline staff is eligible. But additional building modifications, not necessarily in this round. So we could play the shell game and shuffle some things around a little, but not likely that it would be able to be used for building modifications this go.
Great. Thanks.
But I will say we've got plenty of water and sewer needs that we didn't even appear on the CIP. Things that really we haven't even planned for because we didn't see a path for us to be able to fund them in the short term. So these additional stimulus dollars will certainly go a long way to tackle projects that really were probably out of reach for us for the foreseeable future. So it's really going to allow us to escalate that plan much sooner than we anticipated.
Anyone else have any questions for Pete or Nathan or Ann concerning the CIP?
The one of the costs that you got way out in 28 is the garbage truck replacement, which we seem to do a whole lot. We seem to do, the trucks don't hold up for some reason. And about every 2 years, we're replacing a truck. Now, maybe that's my old age.
Well, the current truck that we have, the most recent truck's about 2 years old at this point. And so roughly you need to start budgeting for those about every 8 to 10 years for the large equipment replacement. So, by and large, that's about the right schedule for us to be thinking about replacing something of that's used daily. And it is a very heavily used vehicle, obviously, and takes a lot of wear and tear. So we currently have 2 backup trucks, and occasionally things break. And so we would like to start programming that replacement, and the current truck that we have would then be cycled down to a backup. And it would always be good to have 2, if not 3 vehicles in service, because that's not something you'd want to be without for very long. So we feel like 2028 would be about the right time, and it may be pushed out to 29 and 30, but we feel like that's about the right time to start programming to replace that vehicle.
Okay, I'm not questioning the year. I'm questioning, should that be a one-arm bandit? And you could have significant payroll savings in taking your trucks from 3 and 4 people back to 1.
Dave, you're absolutely right, and we'll be definitely considering that option the next time we purchase a vehicle. We do feel like there's some efficiencies that could be realized there. That necessarily wasn't discussed, to my knowledge, the last time we purchased a truck. But when we are approaching the time to buy our next truck, we will certainly be looking at that option.
Okay.
Hey, Pete, just real quick, that I remember those discussions quite well, and we were wanting a one-armed bandit, and we were told that a one-armed bandit wouldn't work in the alleys, and I believe that's correct. However, I don't think now, after going back and reviewing that, we don't have that many alleys that we go down to get trash anyway. So it would probably serve 85% of the town, and we could use a backup for the alley. So however, hopefully this time going forward, when we are doing some research on replacing a truck, another thing that I'm aware of is the truck that we bought is actually not as big as what we really needed to have to begin with. So hopefully going forward, we have a good study in place and spend some time on researching what our best option is. So, because I think at the very beginning, we started seeing issues with converting our truck to the tippers and some other issues that went on. So just keeping in mind, if we're not all around, hopefully whoever's left will do a lot of research on our next refuge replacement purchase.
Well said, Mr. Chair, and we'll certainly put that in the notes for our next purchase.
One of the other things that I've been after us for years and it did get accomplished was that we fixed some of the streets for storm sewer, and mysteriously we did get the one fixed on the back corner of Vinton Baptist. Did a nice job. We've still got the one left there at the post office that somehow needs to get done. And to me, what you need to tie that in with something else that's going on in the area. And that's how that you had a repair in the area there behind Vinton Baptist, and that sewer came in and fixed that problem. Need to do the same thing right there at DR Music and on her corner. So
Yes, sir. We actually have just received a proposal from one of our engineering firms. We hope to do some conceptual planning for Lee Avenue between the Farmers Market and Maple. That we will be looking at aesthetic improvements such as tree canopy, improving and making more efficient parking along that right of way. And we're certainly looking at stormwater opportunities there. So I say within the next 6 to 8 months, we'll be taking a very hard look at Lee Avenue on those 2 blocks in all aspects of civic space, pedestrian, parking, and utilities, and make some recommendations for future funding to correct some of those issues across the board. So that is we've been successful in getting VDOT funding from Walnut, along Walnut from the city limits all the way to the farmers market. So we have got design and construction funds aligned for the next 5 to 6 years. So now we're taking the next step to extend that look further up Lee, but on those 2 blocks, as I mentioned, and certainly utilities will be discussed there. And we hope that we can tackle any stormwater needs in that block when we're doing the analysis and then eventually construction.
okay. One last question. You have in there in 1 year a skate park. Where are you looking to put that?
We've considered a couple locations. We haven't really narrowed in on a spot yet. We have some environmental protection agency funds, brownfield assessment grant funds, that do allow us to do some conceptual plans. So it doesn't cost the town anything to consider a couple of sites. So we're going to be looking at a number of sites over the next several months, trying to plan what the site may look like in a couple different locations. And then we'll be vetting that with stakeholder groups early in the process to get their feedback, some adjacent and adjoining property owners to see what their feedback is and what accommodations we might need to make for those adjacent landowners. We'll vet that down into a couple of project locations and then hopes to be able to go into design, full design and funding that in year 2. So we've got an outlay here of how we would tackle that project. So the long answer is we haven't determined it yet. The short answer is it's coming.
Well, in my little circle, which has really been like everybody else's constricted this year because of COVID, in the people that I've seen, I've heard just so many neat things about what's going on in Vinton, and I'm so proud to be a Vinton resident and able to continue to serve on the planning commission. And this process right here that you're going through has so improved from the time I first started. For you to be looking 6 years out is amazing to me, and to see, hey, we think we've got adequate money to be able to do this is just phenomenal, and you're to be praised for what you're doing and doing well.
Dave, you said that was when you first started. Was that around the time the mill was built?
No. No, I didn't come on then. At 35? No, my Vinton time started in 1986. That's when I came to town.
A long time. Yeah, I have to agree with you. The staff that the town is lucky to have, it does a phenomenal job to, number one, plan, but then also give us detailed reports to where we can easily understand and then walk us through them to make it even easier. So they're always commended at council meetings for, and couldn't do it without the staff. I mean, we don't do anything, planning commission and the town council and everybody else doesn't do anything. It's the staff that does all the work. We just get to vote on what they continue to work on. So a lot of the things they work on, we don't even see. So we just have a phenomenal staff.
Well, you've had some changes in the past 8 months. Town manager, public works director, chief of police. You've had a lot of huge changes that have been very positive, and seeing some really neat things come out of it. We've been talking a lot of years about things, and it's starting to happen, and you see it. And people outside of in the valley are talking about Vinton. Man, Vinton's on fire, and that's good when you hear these people talk about how good things are happening over in our little town. Look how many new places there are in town to eat right now.
Yep. We are becoming that go-to town, not that go-through town.
Yep.
Any other questions about the CIP for staff, or any comments for Ann or Pete or Nathan or Anita or anyone? All right, hearing none, I would say that reviewing the agenda, we've had our 2 briefings, no comments from staff or from the commissioners. So the next thing on our agenda is I will ask to see if there's a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
just to get a head nod of, if Planning Commission are in agreement with what Ms. Cantrell has presented for the CIP fiscal year 21, 22 to 28. Since this is a work session, we don't really have to have a formal motion, but just basically whether the Planning Commission have any in support with what have been presented.
Commissioners?
Isn't it pending the CARES Act money? It's not.
This particular CIP we presented tonight is not contingent to any CARES Act funding. This is actually a town funded project or based on our current revenues.
Okay.
CARES Act funding
I
would
just-
actually be in addition.
Okay, we were talking about the water and sewage. So I saw that on some of the funding, and I got a little confused there for a minute.
I'm all for what you've presented.
I agree.
I agree as well.
Yes.
Agreed.
So for going from what I understand, we will all be voting on this approval of the CIP and the rezoning of Gish's Mill on April the 6th during a council meeting. So Anita, is it good to adjourn now, or do you have what you need?
Yes, sir. As far as on the April 6th is the, like you said, the joint public hearing is for the rezoning.
By chance, is that meeting going to be live?
Yes,
Yes.
Great.
it has to be.
April 6th will not be in person.
Oh, yeah, well, yes, I'm sorry, Dave. This is the new live. I thought that's what you were talking about.
We are discussing plans in the fairly near future to get back into in-person meetings, but it will not be in time for April 6th. So that will still be a virtual Zoom presentation.
Okay.
Yeah, I apologize, Dave. I misunderstood. I guess you could ask that question and have the two different answers mean the same thing. So I apologize for that. Okay, go ahead and anyone have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
I'd second that.
All right, I'll quote the mayor and say, everyone signify by turning off your computers.
Thank you all. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. See you April 6th.